Okay. And half the time my mind is spinning. Did I remember to unmute? So I got to double check, because that would be a travesty. Okay. Well, I am Jimmy Byrne, and welcome you to TRUU this morning. And I have one more piece that I'm going to play just as people are coming in. There's a little welcome music, a little gathering music before the prelude begins. So I want to play this fun, not fun, it's a lovely little piece called Gliding and Running. It comes from the school of people who wrote music specifically for eurythmy classes over in Europe in the early 20th century. So here we go. Okay, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you this morning. Thanks for joining in as a TRUU community. We are pre-taping this. It's a Friday morning, but I feel like I'm together with you at this moment because we are recording this kind of live. You know, we're all on the phone together here putting this service on for you. I was actually hoping to pre-record this music. I realized that the music isn't clear as we're recording onto the cloud, and so I wanted to pre-record it, and I did it, and I just couldn't get the file uploaded. I spent hours on it, but we're going to keep getting this better. I know that I'm not satisfied with the way the music is sounding, and I'm going to try to make it better. So with that, I'm going to play for you a song that's been a UU favorite for a couple, I think it's been around about 20 years, by a man named Peter Mayer, and tells a story that many of us are familiar with as our own personal stories. I certainly am. And well, it's May 1st. It's a time to celebrate the coming of spring, so I've got my dandelion shirt on. Yes, they are sunflowers, but it's a dandelion shirt today because we need to celebrate our Dandelion Day however we can. And dandelions came early this year. So anyway, here's that great song by Peter Mayer. When I was a boy each week, on Sunday we'd go to church, pay attention to the priest as he would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was at Sunday school, we'd learn about the times Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything Everything's a miracle. Well, wine from water is not so strong, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. And it used to be a world half there, having second-rate hand-me-down. Now I'm walking with the reverend air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Sure, you can read a questioning child's face, say it's not a testament, but that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, I tell you that can be done. Last morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse, made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Broadband, getting me to your homes, and to the south, so standing proud. Sound that we share, together we are in our hearts. Everything is holy now.
Good morning, and welcome to this online service of TRUU Rivers Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Carbondale, Colorado. I am Reverend Laurie Bushbaum, the interim minister at TRUU Rivers. Due to the coronavirus, we are not physically gathered in one place, but our hearts are together. Whether you are here for the very first time or have been connected to TRUU for years, right now you are part of this beloved community. We gather each week to support one another as we seek to live lives of joy, integrity, and service. During the service, you are welcome to post comments on the chat on the right of your screen. And the good news today is that after the service at 11 a.m., we will finally get to have a Zoom coffee hour moderated by Congregational President Rob Benedetti. The link is in your newsletter, and it will also be in the chat box on the right of your screen. And now, Susan Cashel, our worship associate this morning, will read for us our call to worship.
Good morning. It's nice to be here with all of you and imagine you in my brain. As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home, here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other.
We light our chalice this morning, that love will guide us, that hope and truth and our deepest values will steer us today, tomorrow, and every day. And now Jimmy will lead us in this morning's opening hymn, The Lone Wild Bird.
The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leave thy sight. And I am the heart, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dark deep and far off land, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. Great Spirit, come and rest in me.
Please join me in reading our shared covenant, and then we'll sing Spirit of Life. Love is the spirit of this community, and service is its prayer. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our wisdom for all ages this morning is a book called A Map into the World by Cao Kalia Yang, who is a Minnesota Hmong writer who, in fact, just Tuesday night won a Minnesota Book Award for this new children's book publication. It tells about a Hmong family, and it mentions the Hmong story cloths, the traditional Hmong textiles. So I thought I have a couple, so I was just going to show them. This is one of them. And here's one that's actually a story cloth. That's actually, this one is about the birth of Jesus. And before I read the story, I just got to notice that for some reason, my cell phone is draining really quickly. So we are going to have to pause while I run and plug in my phone. So hang on. We'll be right back. Thanks for the cover, Jimmy. You're
All
brilliant.
right, there you go.
It's great to have a flexible musician in the house. All right, so the story, A Map into the World. Goes like this. The first time we saw the swing and the slide and the garden of the greenhouse with the big windows, my mother sat down in a chair in the backyard and said she did not want to get up. Tie-tack and I looked at the garden, and she pointed out tomatoes, green beans, and a watermelon as round as my mother's belly. The greenhouse became our house. I helped tie-tack hang the special story cloth on the wall, telling how the Hmong people got to America. We saw an old man and woman through the window. They waved, and we waved back. Later, my mother and father brought me across the street. The old man's name was Bob, and the old woman's name was Ruth. Up close, I could see that they were even older than tie-tack. Tie-tack and I were in the garden picking tomatoes when my parents brought my baby brothers home from the hospital. The boys were smaller than my baby dolls, but much cuter. Some days the babies cried very loud. I covered my ears and with my hands and asked my father to take me outside. Bob and Ruth were often sitting on their special bench. We waved back and forth. The leaves on the ginkgo trees by Bob and Ruth's house turned yellow like apricots. I brought in a leaf for the babies to touch, but my mother said, "They're still too little, Pantau." And her name, Pantau, means flower cloth, which is the same name as the textile. The snow made the world quiet around us. We stopped seeing Bob and Ruth outside. The snowflakes fell on their driveway and glittered in the gray light. At night, I looked out our big window at Bob and Ruth's house to see their lights shining across the street. Sometimes I saw the shape of a person looking back at me. I waved and waved, but the shadow person never waved back. On a cold morning, cars came to our block, filling the street. Car doors slammed as men and women in their thick jackets walked quickly to Bob and Ruth's house. My father said, "Ruth has died. Her family is coming to say goodbye." The cars kept coming and coming all day and into the next. I swayed back and forth on my toes by the big window. After the Hmong New Year, my brothers learned how to sit all by themselves. And we all sat looking out the window together. I clapped for them each time an airplane flew across the sky, and they giggled each time. But the house across the street looked empty. The ginkgo trees reached for the sky with their thin fingers, but nobody seemed home. When the snow started melting, I could not wait to return to the swing and the slide and the garden. I found the first worm of spring on the sidewalk, and I named her Annette. I wanted to bring her inside so my brothers could watch her wriggle, but my mother said, "I don't think so, Pandau." The world became green again, and finally we all went outside. Tai planted onions. I picked flowers from the lilac bush for my brothers to smell. They opened their mouths and tried to eat them. We took the babies outside again the next day after brunch. Bob's garage door was open, and we all watched as he pushed out his special bench. But he sat down alone. I pulled at my mother's sleeve until she looked at me, and I whispered an idea into her ear. My mother and I crossed the street and walked over to where Bob was sitting. I let the sidewalk chalk bucket swing in my hands. I asked my mother to ask Bob if I could draw in his driveway. I said, if he doesn't like it, the rain will come and wash it away. Bob nodded and said, "Go ahead." My mother and Bob talked in low voices. I could hear Bob say, "Ruth, she was with me for 60 years. So I started my picture with a teardrop. And then I made it splatter like sunshine. I drew lines leading away from the splattered sun in many directions. I drew a line. That led to the garden, and there I put a yellow ginkgo leaf. I drew a line that led to the grass. There I made and then I made the sparkling snow. I drew a line to the sidewalk. There I put a smiling worm. I drew an arrow to our house. And there I drew the whole world. When I was alone, I walked quietly to my mother and then to Bob. They stopped talking and Bob shook my hand. "What did you draw for me?" I said in a whisper, "I drew a map into the world for you, Bob, just in case you need it." And Bob said, as he picked me up, "I think I might." I invite you to settle in mind, body, and spirit for a time of prayer and meditation. You might want to take a few deep breaths or close your eyes. There is no exact map for this time we are living in. We listen to history and science for clues about how to navigate in this uncharted territory. As you listen in this moment to your heart and to the voice within, what wisdom do you hear about how to be in this world right now? While we pause for a moment, you're welcome to type a word or a phrase into the chat so you can share your wisdom with each other. I invite you to speak aloud or in your heart the names of those who may be lost and needing help on their journey. We honor all that has been spoken and that remains unspoken in our hearts and minds. And now Jimmy will lead us in singing Comfort Me.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, oh my soul.
I'm going to do a reading, Tie-Tack by Reverend Gordon McKeeman. There are many relics in our home, objects to which important memories are attached. Each recalls some journey, event, or person that is part of your life's experience. In a sense, They're like religious objects that summon up powerful recollections. One of my favorites is my tie-tack. It's an opal full of fiery iridescence. The tie-tack was an unexpected gift. Its former owner came out of the church's worship one Sunday. As I greeted him, I noticed his tie-tack and I said to him, "What a beautiful opal." On the spot, he took it off and gave it to me. I was both delighted and chagrined. I took off my tie-tack, a flaming chalice, and gave it to him. It was far from an equal exchange. More important, what he did in that fleeting moment was very typical of him. He lived an ordinary life, a salesman of advertising novelties, so he spent much time in his car traveling from client to client. He spent a significant portion of his driving time thinking of ways to improve the community. He could be counted on to make suggestions for some modest and simple change that would make a positive and real difference in people's lives. One of my joys associated with wearing a necktie is to put on my tie-tack. I have quite a few of them, but the opal is always my choice. It's a ritual. I put it on and remember the man who gave it to me. And I resolved to find in this day some opportunity to continue what was his real life's work, doing something simple, modest, and useful to improve the life of the community. Over the many years I've worn my tie-tack, many people have admired it. To many of them, I have told the story of my acquisition of it and what it means to me. With each telling, I've confessed that I ought to give it away since that's how I obtained it, by admiring it. Someday, I know I will give it away together with its story. Meanwhile, I keep wearing it and keep reminding myself of its meaning in my life. And now Jimmy's going to do a musical meditation.
Many of you probably know that bats, with their tiny eyes and enormous ears, navigate through the dark by echolocation. As they fly at night, they emit sounds undetectable to the human ear. The sound bounces off nearby objects, and from the returning sound waves, bats can read the size and shape of what is around them. This is how many bats navigate. But not all bats are the same. Fruit bats, for example, have small ears and huge eyes, which gives them nearly perfect night vision. What I learned from the book Natural Compass is that many young birds are able to navigate back to their nests after just a few test flights, and then taken to a new home after just one or two brief outings and confined for up to several years. Pigeons will nevertheless generally be able to return to their natal loft at the first opportunity. How do they do this? And did you know that honeybees dance to navigate among their food sources? They draw accurate maps to food by wiggling their backsides, and the direction of their wiggle communicates the direction of their food to other bees. More specifically, their dance generates distance and directional coordinates. Pointing up refers to the sun, and then the dancer reveals the relative direction of the sun by wiggling left or right. Just think how much dancing is contained in a jar of honey. Like other animals, we too use our sight and sound and touch to navigate. The Vikings had a few tricks up their sleeves, and I'd like to tell you about. The story of a 9th century Norseman named Floki, who first intentionally navigated his way to Iceland, provides a few fascinating tidbits. His first tool was the North Star, of course. But Floki also had a sun shadow board, which was used each day at noon, if the sun was shining, to determine if the ship was on course. The shadow board was placed in a deep container of water so that it was floating level. Then the pin in the center of the board marked the shadow of the noon sun. If the shadow of the sun was outside the marked circles on the board, the sailors knew they had traveled too far south. If the shadow extended too far inside the marked circles, they had moved too far south. However, on a cloudy day, the Norse travelers might have been out of luck for a special property called the sunstone. It so happens that a mineral called Icelandic spur changes color as it's turned in the light. So on a cloudy day, a Viking scholar took out his stone and could still read the position of the sun. Since no sunstones actually survived the Viking Age, many historians thought that this was just the stuff of legend. But in 1990, on a ship that sunk in 1592, scientists found a chunk of sunstone about the size of a bar of soap. They tested it, and guess what? It did indeed work as a navigational tool. The final tools used to navigate to Iceland on that first voyage were 3 ravens brought on the voyage for just this purpose. The first raven flew back to Norway, which told Floki he was not very near his destination at all. The second raven circled above the ship and eventually flew back to the vessel, communicating that there was no land close enough to fly toward. But the third raven, given its freedom a few days later, took off to the northwest and did not return. Floki set his ship's course to follow this final bird and landed the boat in Iceland. Humans have invented increasingly more complex forms of navigation, but it never occurred to me that a person could navigate through life with a tie-tack. But in part, that's what Gordon McKeeman did, as he told us his story of being given a tie-tack by a congregation member and keeping it all his life, wearing it as a reminder of this generosity. Sitting there anchored to his chest, it reminded him of what his values were and how he aimed to walk through each day guided by those values. And the little girl in our story this morning helped her elderly neighbor navigate through his grief with her heartfelt chalk drawings on his sidewalk. We navigate with our values and our principles. After reading Mr. McKeeman's lovely piece about his tie-tack, I wandered through my house and chose several things by which I navigate. And so I want to show you these items. Remember that show and tell in kindergarten? Well, we're going to have a little show and tell now. So this is a photo of a Norwegian house my parents built on the shore of a lake. I treasure the photo albums my mother made for all of us kids. They have helped cement particular memories of my childhood and family lore. I know that I navigate most of my day by memory, the memories of my family of origin and the places I've called home. These are the experiences and stories that tell me who I am and where I've been. For better or worse, these foundational places and touchstones are in my core. Some have served me well and I keep them as treasures, and others I have let go along the way. But memory, for sure, is a major navigational tool. The second item I want to show you is this piece of birch bark. I grew up in places where I was outside most of the time, building forts in the woods, swimming in the lake, taking off on my horse. My dad taught me to ski when I was 3 years old. I love to run, cycle, hike, ski, and kayak because I'm happiest outside. What I know is that I lose my internal and spiritual bearings if I am in a congested area for very long. When my family goes to visit relatives in New York City, I am always the first one to get claustrophobic. I start gasping for trees in quiet places and wild places. So in part, I navigate by natural beauty. I also navigate significantly through life with my creativity. I come from a long line of artists on both sides of my family, and my mother filled our home with creative fun. I need creative time like other people need food. It took me decades to understand that while I'm creating something, I am actually engaged in a navigational process that keeps me centered. So I want to show you a section of a quilt I made the year my father was dying of cancer. It contains more than 700 pieces, and I often brought some of those pieces with me to the hospital to sew while he was sleeping or while we were waiting for tests. I also wanted to share a book with you because I know that there are books that I have read that have changed my life. For example, I remember in college learning to read and understand the beauty of poetry. I suddenly felt as if I could hear a new language and the sounds beneath the sounds of everyday conversation. So I have a whole special shelf of books at home that when I read them, they were like windows of my being suddenly flying open. So I know that I also navigate by what touches and inspires us. Being in a UU church for the first time when I was 20 years old and reading a pamphlet that I picked up was a life-changing moment. I have been steering with Unitarian Universalism ever since. And the flaming chalice necklace that I am wearing this morning is a symbol of my faith and the centuries of human history and longing and seeking that it represents. Certainly, I navigate by the spiritual and ethical demands of ministry and the blessings of my calling. So, not just me, but I think all of us navigate by our deepest callings and truths, whatever they are. Finally, I want to say that I navigate by the wedding ring on my hand. It's a daily reminder of my family, of the core commitments, sacrifices, and love that structures much of my personal life. So we all navigate by our promises and by our love. For the most part, these items are representations of what brings me happiness. Perhaps you've heard the proclamation by the psychologist Carl Jung to follow your bliss. And doing so aims us toward what brings us joy and fulfillment, and perhaps that is part of our true north. But I think we also learn our way through our failures and our mistakes and encountering dead ends. I like to think of true north as the home in my soul or self, whatever you call the deepest or highest, truest part of you. I'm convinced that knowing who and what we are reading the constellations of our inner galaxy is the surest way to navigate through the world without utterly getting lost. Of course, even if we do follow our bliss, we may still sometimes feel that we have just sailed over the edge of the world. We can be on the path and still feel lost at times. Our navigational tools can come into conflict with each other. Even by attempting to follow our true north, we will encounter terrific challenges that require course corrections. When our daughter was in college, she had the opportunity to study abroad in Patagonia, Chile. She and a small group of other students camped for 3 months in the Patagonian wilderness, studying field conservation biology. In preparation for her trip, my husband was planning to give her his father's field compass to take with her. My father-in-law had just passed away. He spent his life in the field studying baboons in Kenya. So this was going to be a very special gift. But then we discovered that my father-in-law's compass was magnetically weighted in such a way that it would not work very well in Patagonia. These days, one can purchase a universal compass that will work anywhere, but his compass was old, and so we decided to buy our daughter one that was weighted specifically for the southern hemisphere because it would be more accurate. Sometimes someone else's navigational tools don't work for our purposes, or we change directions. Along the way, most of us will need to consult our sunstone or compass or tie-tack or photos or journals over and over again to keep headed toward our own true north. After all, our faith journeys never end. Hopefully, we never arrive at a place where we feel there are no inner landscapes left to explore. All our days we can refine what we know. All our days we can be curious. All our lives we can learn to navigate with more love. And so I leave you with a question this morning. What navigational tools do you carry? And how do they guide you?
Now it's time for our offering. It's going to be interesting to do it, but we're going to do it online. This congregation is a place where gifts are given and gifts are received. We give to one another and we give far beyond our walls. In a community, we take the blessings and burdens of life and transform them into tools by which we can navigate our journeys in a way that's richer than traveling alone. We're a community. This morning's offering will be received to support our ministry at TRUU. If you wish to make an offering, you can do so on our website, TRUU.org. At the bottom of the homepage, you'll find an image of an offering plate. If you click on that, you'll be able to give. And now we're going to sing From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
We extinguish this flame, but not the warmth of compassion, the glow of love, the fire of commitment, or the light of truth. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now Jimmy will lead us in our closing hymn this morning, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, we lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us, we lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. Love will guide us through the hard night. God, let your love light guide you through.
Before the benediction, I want to remind you to join the Zoom coffee hour if you would like, so you can see one another's faces and chat in real time. Today and in the days to come, may you remember that there are tools everywhere to help you move through this world. There is this congregation. There is the hope of the sunrise and sunset. There are all of your favorite things. There are companions in music and story, ready to whisper to you the way forward. We will close our service this morning with Jimmy's One World Home.
Thank you for joining in this morning. I hope to get to check in with you, some of you, over our virtual coffee hour. And here we go. If you feel like standing and moving around and singing this song with me in your homes there, please do so. All the joys and the griefs, the colors and the leaves, the sunlight shines upon us all the same. Open minds, loving hearts, helping hands, it's a start. One world home, one world home, one world home. Open minds, loving hearts, helping hands, it's a start. One world home, one world home, one world home. One world home, one world home, one world home. Blessings.
Bye, guys. This was kind of fun. If you need me, let me know. Otherwise, I'm out of here. Great job. My buddy.
Yeah, don't forget to click your mic or to close out officially by pressing the button.
Where do I do that? Let's see. Oh.
Hang up the phone. Bye-bye.